I was just on a mission because I truly was taking a knife to a gunfight. I was building La Fonda, and then I catch on fire in Ohio. And while I'm laying on the ground and the EMS is talking to me, they asked me questions and I answer them, and you could have heard a pin drop. My eyes were closed, but you could hear a pin drop. It's like nobody was there anymore.
Welcome to the DownShifting Podcast. The stories behind the machines, the people, and the roads that connect them.
Well, first off, the normal. Thank you very much for doing this. No problem. Quick bio, man. I put this together, so correct me if I've got anything incorrect here. So you're a drag racer. You've obviously been a form of a street racer, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You've been waving the Texas flag for racers since the early 90s.
Yes.
You're an absolute pioneer in true street, Pro 5.0.
Street Outlaw, actually. It used to be a class called Street Outlaw before that Street Outlaw. So it was like it's the true 28-10-5 is what they call it now.
Okay.
But it was, so Outlaw, then they called it Street Outlaw.
All right.
450 was a really fast guys like Mangrum that were on top of us.
You're a 16-time world champion in various drag racing leagues.
Yes, sir.
2018 No Prep Kings champion.
Yes.
Fantastic. Take us through the journey. So are you originally from Texas?
No, born in Ohio.
Okay, so got to Texas as fast as you could?
Yeah, so my dad's from here in San Antonio.
Okay.
And my mom is from Ohio, and so my dad was in the military. And so that's how they met.
Okay.
And then I was born in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay. So then you moved to Texas. What
Yep.
brought you to Texas?
So I was big into sports when I was growing up. My dad was a big football player, big-time football player, as a quarterback. And so drag racing and any kind of automotive stuff wasn't even in the picture.
Okay.
And anybody in my family, really. But my dad, being the football guru that he was, football was everything to me. And so what actually brought me here was the end of my sophomore year. Back home in Ohio, I was doing good on the football team, and my goals was to be a professional football player. And so everybody in my family knew that, all my friends knew that. And so my uncle, who lived here in San Antonio, he made a call one day, and I just got done with my sophomore year and up there of sophomore year of school. And he said, if you're serious about it, you need to come to Texas. And I was on a flight within a week.
That's
So
awesome.
I came here at the end of my sophomore year.
Okay. So how did that transition into the car world?
Football didn't work out. So I was kind of lost for several years. So I kind of was a late bloomer into the hot rod field. And then I ended up, my favorite vehicle was at the time, still is actually, is a Smokey and the Bandit Trans Am. And so I ended up getting one of those. Well, then it got totaled. But during that time when I had the Trans Am, I would get smoked by Mustangs out street racing.
Okay.
So I figured, can't beat them, join them. So that's kind of
Okay.
where it all started.
As that evolved, how did you start working on other people's cars?
So when I had the Mustang, I at that time I was kind of bouncing around from working for my dad to trying to be independent and not working for him. And so, I was kind of bouncing around
Right.
with different jobs, from selling life insurance and securities to, which I would have been really good at, I feel like, if I would have been a little bit older. Because,
Right.
who wants to listen to an 18-year-old kid? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tell them about finances. I wouldn't.
What do you know about it?
Yeah. And I actually knew a lot. I studied a lot of that stuff. So anyway, so I ended up getting a job at a Chief Auto Parts because I started building, this Mustang that I got. And the first time I got a Mustang, it was so funny because, again, I wasn't anything mechanical at all.
Right.
Mechanical on the car besides changing oil.
Okay.
Like, let's put it this way. My Trans Am, the modifications were a set of headers and some air shocks.
Okay.
So I was very limited on what I knew. But I had this Mustang, and I remember telling her, it was my first wife. I told her, I said, man, if I just get this Mustang, man, if they're fast enough, I won't do anything to it. Because she knew, you know what I mean? It's like being a drug addict.
You're going to go down the rabbit hole.
Yes. And so, anyways, I got the car, and before you knew it, I started messing with it, and I started going out street racing with it. And it just kind of all evolved from, hey, working on buddies' cars that you met, to I met a guy named Jeff who was working at Chief Auto Parts, and he's the one that got me the job there. And so we started a business together.
Okay.
And it was called Texas Jam. That was the very first, Mustang business here in San Antonio. Anyway, so we got together, and it's called Jeff and Mike Texas Jam.
Okay.
And that's where that all started. So
all right, very cool.
That kind of got the snowball rolling.
Okay, that is very cool. So how did that transition you into? I remember you from before all the Street Outlaw stuff and everything.
Yes.
From being at all the Fun Ford weekend stuff.
Yes.
And
so
man, that crazy event. So how did that come to be?
So I was so scared. It took me a while to go out on the street, because I'm one of those that I want to be prepared. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I everybody learns more when they get their asses whooped, but I really didn't like getting my ass whooped. So, it took me a minute. When I say a minute, it took me, probably a year before I actually started taking that car out and street racing it, because I just didn't think I was fast. I didn't think it was fast enough. And so, you know how that goes with pretty much every hot rod guy's story. So when I finally did, I was beating the majority of the cars I was racing. And so it just evolved. You know what I mean? There was a guy ahead of me, one generation ahead of me. His name was Mike Acord, and he was the fastest dude in San Antonio. And he had a reputation of, he didn't mingle with us. Like, we would all be in a parking lot of a Sonic, and he would just drive by. He wouldn't hang out with us. And you go to the track, same thing. And so he was kind of the goal. He was the, the carrot on the stick of, that caliber of a guy, very respected. So I was really chasing him.
Okay.
And so I finally, that torch had to be passed, and that was in like the end of 1992.
Okay.
And here's another funny story. So a lot of your viewers probably never heard of Alamo Dragway. So Alamo Dragway was the track here in San Antonio. So that is it was a rundown track, like bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that because I had never been to a track anywhere else.
No comparison.
That was the first track, and I feel like that contributed to the success I had later, because I adapted and I made that track work for me as far as I learned to go fast on a shitty track.
Right.
But I really didn't know it was shitty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you had no point of reference.
So I was hauling ass. I beat Mike Acord's record. I tried to race him, and that's another funny story. But so long story short, the first event that I go to is a Fun Ford weekend, and this is I think it was the end of '92, maybe, or the beginning of '93, and it was at Ennis. It was at that track.
Yeah.
So true story. So I go up there. Now this is before internet. Your map was a map.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I rolled by Ennis 2 times, going back and forth, saying that's not a racetrack. That's got to be a football stadium.
Okay.
You know what I mean? For
Yeah.
real. I think I even stopped somewhere and said, "Hey, I'm looking for the Texas Motorplex." And they're like, "That was it."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like,
Yeah.
"Wow, holy
Yeah.
shit!"
Yeah, look at this place.
So I pulled in there, and I just remember watching it at the time. The fastest guy in that Street Outlaw class was a guy out of Florida, and they were up running, and he had gone a 10:44 for the national record, right? Wow. Well, I had gone 10:39 at my shitty track back in San Antonio. So I'm like,
Right.
oh man,
Yeah.
I mean, I need to do this.
I'm in.
So I started pushing towards that. So I was preparing. I was going to go. So the very first race was always spring break shootout in Florida.
Okay, yeah.
So the beginning of '94, I didn't make that race, obviously, because I don't have the financial means to go that far.
Right.
But I'm going to go to Houston and Dallas, right?
Yeah.
Well, the first event opens up there, and the national record gets taken by UPR.
Okay.
You know who UPR is,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Joey and Mark.
Right.
And I want to say they went a 10:08, something crazy, right?
Okay, yeah.
And I'll never forget just my bubble. Like, oh man, shit, I had gone a 10:32 back here, so I even got faster, right?
Yeah.
So, but that whole year, man. So we went to Houston, and that's when I did my first True Street and Street Outlaws.
Yeah.
And I won the Street Outlaw event, and I came runner-up in the True Street deal.
Okay.
And so that kind of is what launched on. That was the beginning of '94.
Okay.
And so at that point, then I picked up a sponsorship through CarTech. I don't know if you remember CarTech Racing.
No.
So they were here in San Antonio. but they were a Dallas company.
Okay.
Corky Bell, who's huge in the turbo world, he even wrote a book.
Okay.
But they own CarTech. He owned CarTech. So I ended up getting a sponsorship through them. And the sponsorship was, and this was pretty slick, they wanted to start setting up booths at the races. And so they would take a bunch of their merchandise because they were doing fuel systems. They were doing a bunch of stuff before that was even done.
Okay.
Right? They were the ones that really was the innovators on the fuel systems. They had intakes they made for everybody.
Okay.
So anyway, so they said, look, we will tow you everywhere you got to go and we're going to pay your entry. That's a big deal back then, right? I mean, so I had a free ride getting to wherever we needed to go. But they said the first 3 races, you're on your own.
Okay.
So I used my wife's station wagon.
Okay.
And I borrowed a trailer, and it was a front-wheel drive station wagon, Ford station wagon. And I tore her transmission up, but I went, so the very next race is in Bristol.
Okay.
So we went all the way to Bristol, and we won Bristol. And, you know, Gene Deputy, Texas Turbo, those were the fastest guys in the nation. And so he had 2 or 3 guys that were always faster than me, but they were never consistent. Okay. And so back to Alamo Dragway, I was able to adapt and like because remember, they're racing at Houston Raceway Park, which is another Ennis. It's a beautiful track.
Yeah.
Great, you know, the track's awesome.
Yeah.
So they're used to it being prep good. So anytime there was a track that had marginal prep, it would just throw them into left field. However, on my end, I'm used to going. It was almost like no prepping from the very beginning.
Gotcha.
Because Alamo Dragway, there was no such thing as prep. It was a knock the dust off in the cow manure and rock and roll. You know what I mean? So I learned to go down that, and so that just helped. So they would go out there and they would number 1 qualify. Man, I didn't worry about it, but I would come in right behind them and then beat them reaction times. And so that's kind of where it all started in 94.
Okay.
So we won the championship Fun Ford Weekend in 94. We followed it up in 95, followed up again in 96, and then I took a break. And so that's kind of, I took a break. I actually retired is what I called it. And so it went from taking off 97 and coming back 98, 99, 2000. So
okay.
And NMRA started up in the early 2000s.
Right. Well, it's crazy you brought up some of those companies, because that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Was it seems to me like during that time that the only thing that you really seen turbo technology on was like I instantly think of like GTAs, you know, Grand Nationals, things like that. It seems to me like during that era, especially on the Ford side of things, that was kind of the innovator to the whole turbo technology being on V8 cars. Before that, you really didn't see it much.
No.
And that was kind of where you kind of, in my mind, you were very much a part of that forefront of figuring a lot of that stuff out.
But you got to remember, so during that time, like I didn't go turbo until 98.
Okay.
But during that time, Vortech and ProCharger had just started.
Yep.
But the fastest cars were the turbo cars, and those were CarTech and Gene Deputy.
Yeah.
Right there in Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
You know, Texas Turbo, that was the name of their company.
Right.
But I love racing those guys because you got to remember, the turbo technology wasn't where it is today.
Right.
So they had trouble spooling, you know, all the things that make it hard to drag race. I used to love racing them because, I mean, I would jack with them big. It was so easy to mess with the turbo car.
Well, it seemed to me like even the centrifugal technology was changing just as fast as turbos in. So
yeah, absolutely.
Can you take us through some of those changes that
Sure.
you've
So
seen?
now we got to back up a minute. So again, this is my first marriage. So I decided that I wanted to get one of those Vortex. And so those were new at the time. Paxton had been around.
Yeah.
But then Jim Middlebrook, who used to work for Paxton, he kind of started on the floor sweeping, worked his way up through management at Paxton, which is the Granatellis. And then he ended up becoming an engineer or what have you, and then he started Vortech.
Right.
So that now we have direct competition with Paxton. So I was one of the 2 first sponsored Vortech cars, but it was all on the DL.
Okay.
I don't know why at that time they didn't want to announce it. So, but I was basically a factory supported Vortech car. So like when all the new blowers came out that they hadn't released yet, one was on my car.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? I'm sure there's going to be some of the guys that see this and say, "Oh, that mother."
Yeah. Now we know.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a bunch of the new stuff. You know, I was kind of their R&D. So anyway, so I was one of the first ones, and then there was Jimmy and his brother, the Keene brothers, out of Florida, if I remember right. Anyways, so yeah, Vortech was really the head at the pecking table when it came to the supercharger stuff, and so they were doing really well. And Vortech's demise, and this is a lesson for companies to learn, and I see that going on today, is when you become the baddest ones out there, then you start to neglect your customers. So what Vortech had actually done is their blowers started blowing up. And what it was is they got a bunch of bad impellers that were, I think, not forged. It was something that they do with the metal. And there was a bunch of them that were bad, like I don't know how many, and they were all in the Mondo blowers. Okay, so they started blowing up. Wow. Well, what they were doing is they were blaming it on the customer. They were saying, oh, you spun it too fast in the burnout, or your blow-off valve isn't operating correctly. Instead of them, and I'm sure they would make a change now if they could, but instead of just saying, hey, we need to recall this stuff, and because you think about it, how many racers out there have the Mondo blower at the time? Right. There wasn't that many of them. Yeah. There really wasn't. Right. Just take it in the chin, get it fixed, because that really hurt them. And if you look at back then, you look at what really went on during that time, that's when ProCharger went from people laughing at them. I used to laugh at them because, like, when they first came out with the blower, we were at one race and Jimmy LaRocca, his might have been Nitrous Pete, his blower pulley came off and went down the track. Oh, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it was like, oh, there we go, Yeah. But they kept taking care of their customers, and what happened is Mondo is treating people, or Vortech treating people like shit, and so they start to decline, and ProCharger took off and never looked back, and it's been, Vortech's never been able to keep back up.
That completely changed that industry.
Yep. And Vortech's a great product. They are a great company. They have, the detail. That's not cheap, piece of crap, but they really blew an opportunity. I feel like it's just my opinion. But.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's what we're here for, man. Kind of get your perspective. Yep. Everybody, I always say everybody's perspective is a little different when you're looking at the circle, Yep. So that's very cool. So I remember kind of, and I'll go forward a little bit, as we entered towards that 2008 economic downfall. Yeah. All that sort of started tapering off. So I didn't hear much about like you and the main rooms and those guys. So where was you at kind of as that transition started to happen? In 2004, my first wife passed away. Okay. She passed away from breast cancer. Okay. And so I and my current wife, she was already my ex-wife at the time, but so we ended up taking my two oldest daughters. And, in 2004, that was rough. Because that changes everything. Sure. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if I could change anything, if I could, I would not obviously want my ex-wife to pass away, but I wouldn't change anything about it affecting my life and taking my oldest daughters and Lisa raised them like they were her own, and you know what I mean? It was a tough situation, but during that time I was building La Fonda. So, because we had bought that car from Chuck Samuels. In fact, this car right here, it was maroon at the time, but it was one of two of the first Fox bodies that went 200 miles an hour. And if you look in the history books, they did it one right after the other. Okay. And so another guy named Jimmy, what the hell was his name? That's what happens when you get old. Jimmy, he went up, was Pro 5.0. He went up and ran 200 miles an hour, and then Chuck Samuels came right behind it, went 200. Okay. And so we bought that car in 2001 as a roller. Okay. As a roller. So, all right. Anyways, 2004, we were still building this car, building a new motor. We kind of figured out where we wanted to go with it. And so it took me 3-4 years, because I want to say in 2008 is when we first started getting going again, but it took me 2008, 2009. I think 2010 we were finally up and rolling again. All right. So that kind of fast forwards us to the point to where my wife and I are flipping channels going by Discovery one night, and we see Mike Murillo, and neither one of us realized what we were watching, and we were like, holy shit, that's Mike Murillo. We were thinking the old Fun Ford days, going to the Motorplex and going to Houston and running into your guys down there doing that. So how did all that start to evolve?
So in 2010, I think we runnered up in, it was a 28 10.5W class. So, I'm trying to remember what it was called. NMCA and NMRA both had that particular class. And so we started doing well. So I think we run it up in 2010, and then 2011, we won both championships.
Okay.
NMRA and NMCA. And then followed it up again in 2012, NMRA, NMCA.
Oh, wow.
So we won 4 championships in 2 years. And that's when I finally was like, okay, you know, enough's enough. I need to do something else.
Yeah.
And it's not that I didn't enjoy drag racing, but it's really taken me a while to realize that this is what I am. This is what I'm going to end up doing for the rest of my life. So all those years, it was like a part-time thing to me.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Having a shop, like I had a shop so that I could race, and I raced so that I could have a shop.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not really up until maybe 2 years ago that I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? But anyway, so we won 2011, 2012. In 2013, we half-assed it, but 2013 is when I finally ended up getting hooked up with Murder Nova and Chief. And how that got started was they were both building turbo cars at the time.
Right.
And so I had never met them before. I really didn't know much about it. I didn't watch the TV show. I knew about the TV show,
Right.
but I didn't. So that's kind of where it all started in 2014, 2015 is when it really started going. And so then I was just doing the show for, a couple years.
Okay. So how was it balancing? Were you still running the shop?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How was that balancing act?
It was difficult because, all the filming is mainly done either up in Fort Worth or Dallas,
Right.
and, obviously up in OKC. And so but I was having fun, man. It really, I can't say that it was a pain in the ass. It really was a lot of fun.
That's
You
cool.
were kind of on the ground floor with, something that was really a hot item, for many, many years,
Yeah.
But, I am a drag racer, and what I accomplished way before I even was involved with that TV show.
Right.
And I feel like there's a stigma because, a lot of guys on that show have an attitude, and I'm not scared to say it, but they think that everything should be given to them.
Okay.
A lot of them do. Not all of them.
Right.
Okay. But, and I really, like right now, I feel like that's kind of what I'm running into whenever I'm trying to, like I'm trying to buy a tent for my daughter who has a softball team, my granddaughter. And so, just an example, like I sent a message to him, say, hey, I would like to talk to you about getting a tent for my daughter's softball team. No return phone call. And I'm telling you right now, the only thing I can think of in my mind is that he probably thinks I want it for free, and I don't.
Right. Yeah.
I really don't. I'm just trying to do the legwork for my daughter.
Right.
But there are so many guys out there that's what they're wanting. That's what they're expecting.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So it kind of makes it. I know we're kind of getting off on a tangent.
No.
But I enjoyed my time on the show. But that's not what makes me.
Okay.
That's not what made me.
Right.
I feel like.
So what are some of the crazier memories from doing that whole adventure?
Probably the craziest memories are with JJ.
Okay.
JJ the boss, and the accidents that were on there. I watched my best friend Birdman almost get killed. I watched a good friend of ours, Dwayne Mills, on his very first on the street pass, almost get killed. Completely trash a $300,000 car.
Man, that's tough.
And my biggest regret with the show is, and I knew it, but that show doesn't give two shits about any of the guys that are on it. They're just wanting you to want it so bad that you will do whatever it takes.
They're wanting footage for
Yes.
a show.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah,
And
that's
how many dangerous situations that they put
typical production
so
companies.
many people in. And we had a choice too. And I said that all the time. I said, it's easy for me. I can just say, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. But I didn't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it just, it's what everybody
Right.
goes through. One of the analogies that I use a lot of times is, it's almost like being in an abusive relationship. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
you're just trying to make it work, and when it finally is severed and you're forced to get away from that person or that thing, is when you can finally go, man, what was I thinking?
Yeah, it's over.
You know what I mean? What was I thinking?
That's awesome.
You know, I mean,
yeah. Truth is what it is, man.
It was a fun opportunity.
Right.
My only regret, I wish I would have stopped doing it a few years. You know, like after we won, like I was on a mission to win, because so many people said I couldn't win another championship doing that.
Right.
And I was just on a mission, because I truly was taking a knife to a gunfight.
Right.
And then that knife even got smaller and the guns got bigger after that season.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just kind of wish I would have tapered back and, you know, and got back to my work. Because we sold this business at the end of 2016.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I sold it in 2001 because I thought I was going to be a police officer.
Okay.
And then we sold it again at the end of 2016 because I was on the road so much and we were gone so much. It was just so much of a headache.
Okay.
And so, you know, now we went back in. The difference is now I'm working with my 25-year-old son and my wife, and my mentality is just so different now than what it was years ago.
That's awesome.
You know, like I pay so much more attention on the business, you know, teaching my guys stuff. And, you know, I'm enjoying it more now than I ever did before.
That is awesome, man. That is too cool. So with that, you've had some pretty crazy health scares. Do you mind telling that a little bit?
Yeah. I was, of course, you know, when you're on the road as much as that, it's like, I say living like a rock star, but we weren't doing all the drugs, but and drinking. You know, when you're burning the candle from both ends for as long as we were, and I was, you know, you're just beating your body up, wearing it down. And so I was always tired. You know, it was always 12 to 14 hour days minimum. Well, we were in between races, and I was up in Tulsa. I was over there at Dwayne's house. And I'm not a spitter, but, you know, like right now the allergy seasons are bad. And so I just you know, spit into the gravel. Like, what is that? And I looked at it, made another loogie, spit it, and I was like, oh shit. And so I had blood. I mean, in the first one was a lot of blood. And so I was like, oh wow. So anyways, that's kind of where it all started. You know, we went to that race in Houston, and then as soon as we were done with that race, we had another one to go to, but I went home and I got all the scans and what have you, and man, I was diagnosed stage 4 cancer.
Oh shit.
Yeah, just a horrible, horrible time.
Man.
Yep.
So kind of how is everything now on the other side?
So, I mean, I just did another scan a couple days ago. We'll know the results this coming up week, and it just sucks, man. You know, I'm still here though.
Right.
But, you know, they have me on some pretty powerful drugs, pills, so I don't have to do chemo stuff.
Okay.
But man, there's a lot of, and I'm not complaining, I'm just telling you.
Sure, yeah, no.
But there's a lot of side effects that have really jack with me. A lot of my brain thinking and you know, just physically, like, you know, just have no energy. But again, I'm here.
That's
you know
awesome.
What I'm saying? But anyway, so I've had 3 or 4 good reports, and hopefully we got another good one. And
that's awesome.
You know, and then in the middle of all that, I catch on fire.
Well, that was what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So with that, literally and figuratively, you've been through the fire.
Oh, yeah.
So can you kind of take us through the fire?
So I had just been diagnosed the month before, but nobody knew. We hadn't told anybody yet. And then I catch on fire in Ohio. And while I'm laying on the ground and the EMS is talking to me, they asked me questions and I answer them, and you could have heard a pin drop. My eyes were closed, but you could hear a pin drop. It's like nobody was there anymore. Because everybody, including Lizzie, she was standing right there. You know, just everybody was like, oh, shit, you know, wow. So,
wow. So, with that, literally and figuratively coming through the fire, so kind of what's next for Mike Murillo right now?
I'm still recovering.
Okay.
I'm still recovering physically. Oh, I forgot to mention that. So I'd blown out my knees at the same time.
Yeah, I seen that online.
And so I've had a total of 2 total knee surgeries, but I've had 5 total with some revisions.
Okay.
And then I had a trip and fall here that my knee came through my skin and looked like the Alien movie. Remember the Alien, little silver?
Yeah.
And so as I'm going down, I look back and I saw that, and it was so my knee's obviously silver in there. So it came out and just split my suture from end to end.
That's
So I got
crazy.
rushed to the hospital for that crap. But
Oh,
so
man.
anyway, so I'm still not recovered. If 8 being a good number, I'm still hovering about a 5.5.
Okay.
And so I'm just getting better and better. My legs are getting stronger.
That's awesome.
And it's hard to keep the weight off. I'm trying to keep the weight off, and so I just need probably another year. Hopefully, I'm still good, but I just need another year. Financially, we went in. That was the other thing. Chasing that dream for so long. I mean, we went into so much debt.
Oh man.
I mean, you got guys that are doing second financing on their home just to. I got to be there. I got to be there for the show.
Wow.
I mean, just stupidity on all of our parts.
That's crazy, man.
And so, but we didn't do that. But we did put ourselves in a financial bind that we're still trying to catch up with.
Right.
Bills and then the new bills that we got coming in. So,
Right.
and again, I'm not bitching.
Sure.
But I just need another year of we're doing good on the shop. We got some very good customers. We got some loyal customers. They finally got a version of Mike Murillo working on their car that they've never ever had before.
Awesome.
You know what I mean?
So where can everybody find you?
It's going in the right direction. You can look at Murillo Motorsports, or you can look at Mike Murillo Racing on Instagram. Just type in Mike Murillo Racing, and they'll find
And
it.
the guys here are all like 100% legit. So,
Yep.
man, y'all have been very gracious. So, man, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it, man. Just grateful to my family, and I got 4 grandkids now.
4 grandkids.
grandkids, yep.
Wow. And your sons are working here at the shop with you all the
My
time?
son is then my youngest son, William. So he's a sophomore in high school right now.
Okay.
And so, man, he is setting the world on fire in track and field stuff. He's a
that's
discus
awesome.
thrower, and so
Very cool.
it's just it's not, and it's also nice being off the road because, just like you came down here for your son's deal, like I don't miss nothing anymore.
That's awesome.
There's so many things that I miss with my other kids growing up, and I don't miss anything anymore.
That is too
You know
cool.
what I mean? So
Well, Mike, you got an absolute shop full of stuff
Thank
to do.
you.
So
Yep.
it's gorgeous shop, great setup.
Thank
so,
you.
man, I cannot thank you enough for your time.
absolutely
Brother, I appreciate you.
appreciate you.
Yes, sir.